तो हमारे रास्तों में कार, बस, साइकिल, लोग सब एक साथ एक ही लेन में चलते हैं और उसी लेन में ऑटो स्टैंड भी रहता है, बस स्टॉप भी रहते हैं, पार्किंग एरियाज भी रहते हैं। तो इस रास्ते के प्लानिंग की कमी की वजह से हमारे देश में मैक्सिमम ट्रैफिक जैम्स होते हैं और एक्सीडेंट्स होते हैं। तो 1951 में रास्तों पर 60% कार और टू व्हीलर्स थे और बसें सिर्फ 11% थी। अब 66 ईयर्स बाद 2016 में कार, बाइक, टैक्सी का ट्रैफिक शेयर हो चुका है 86% और बसें सिर्फ 0.8% हो चुकी है।
Public transport has been reducing in India because the middle class males own motorcycles and they don't need public transport. And therefore, because the motorcycle is a much more efficient way for young people to get around in terms of time spent on the road, especially for short trips, for direct access from home to destination.
Simultaneously, the authorities running the buses also were declining in their capacity to work efficiently. Their depots were inadequate. City was growing in a sprawl, which means it spreads horizontally, and buses are not able to reach place of work um, uh, with comfort. And many buses, because of their bad maintenance, were beginning to um work very inefficiently. They would they would break down on the way, and people, instead of taking the risk of going by public transport, started getting their own personal vehicles.
Public transport demands that everyone who takes a round trip of going somewhere in the morning and come back in the evening, anytime going and coming back, you have to walk at least 2 times, and you have to walk at least 4 times and cross the road at least twice. The walking on the road is not a particularly pleasant experience in most cities in India, especially the modern places, because that we do not have direct access from A to B. There are far too many buildings which are enclosed. There are far too many gated communities. You have to go around them. Far too many institutions like universities and offices and so on. You have to go around them. So instead of walking 800 or 500 kilometers, you have to walk 1.5 kilometers. So it's very, very difficult to walk to the bus stop. Secondly, it's dangerous. It's not safe. It's not easy to cross the street. You can't cross the street very easily because we don't have crossing places on the surface every 200, 300 meters like they do in major cities of the world, wherever public transport is used in large proportions, whether it is London, Paris, Tokyo, anywhere. In the center city, you have a junction every 200, 300 meters. So it is very, very difficult to use the public transport. Thirdly, women have a hard time using public transport because they have a hard time walking on the road because they get bothered, and they have a hard time in the bus because they get bothered. And this is a social issue, it's not a technical issue. CCTV cameras and policemen and so on will not do it. And so this has to improve socially.
तो एक आइडियल रोड स्पेस का डिविजन किस तरह होना चाहिए ये देखते हैं। इस रोड डिज़ाइन का मेन पर्पस है रास्ते का कंजेशन कम करना और सभी मोड्स ऑफ ट्रांसपोर्ट को इक्वल स्पेस देना। तो हर एक रास्ते के दोनों तरफ चौड़े लंबे फुटपाथ होने चाहिए। साइकिल के लिए अलग एक लेन रहेगा। बीआरटी या एक डेडिकेटेड बस लेन रहेगा जिसमें इमरजेंसी सर्विसेज जैसे एम्बुलेंस, फायर ट्रक्स भी जा सकते हैं। मोटर व्हीकल्स के लिए अलग एक लेन रहेगा और एक मल्टी यूटिलिटी जोन भी रहेगा जिसमें बची हुई सारी चीज़ें रहेंगे जैसे पेड़, पार्किंग, हॉकर्स, स्ट्रीट लाइट्स, पब्लिक टॉयलेट्स।
Road really belongs more to the public transport because it's a public road, it belongs to the public transport. And private cars, private two-wheelers have over the years got used to using the road as if it is their own, which it is not. So BRTS was one of the first systems which challenged this monopoly of personal vehicles to hijack part of the road. And BRTS had corridors where no other vehicles could enter, and BRTS buses could travel much faster in that. So this is a revolutionary idea which first was tried out in Brazil, in Curitiba, by the mayor Jaime Lerner, uh, just before the turn of the last century. So around 1990s, late 1990s, the first BRTS, well-planned BRTS, was born in Brazil, and since then there are number of cities all over the world. There are over 100 cities across the world which have some form or the other of BRT. And it comes out of the recognition that the bus which carries 60, 70, or if it's a double bus, 200 people even, has a priority over personal vehicles which occupy roads but carries very few people.
Development of the bus rapid transit system has a long history in India. The concept first was developed in Delhi in India in the late 90s, when a proposal was given to the government for efficient bus transport systems using the concepts of BRT, and it was at that time called the high capacity bus system. This was taken note of by the Delhi government, and finally in 2002 the Delhi government established a high level committee after holding an international conference on BRTs in the world to come up with solutions and ideas and policies for sustainable public transport in Delhi. This committee was chaired by the Chief Secretary of Delhi and had all the concerned departments and experts involved. And the committee suggested, after a large number of meetings, that there should be a set of BRT corridors in Delhi and also 2 lines of a surface tram system. What's very interesting is that as soon as this was done, the government took action and had many meetings and established a committee to start work. And the committee then said we should have one first pilot corridor in an area of Delhi where the bus transport use is very high.
अब सारे रूट में से एक रूट था अंबेडकर नगर से दिल्ली गेट तक. ट्रायल के तौर पर अंबेडकर नगर से मूलचंद का ये जो स्ट्रेच है ये पहले बनाने का डिसाइड हुआ.
In spite of the large number of consultations, national and international consultations with all the stakeholders, many in the press particularly and other professionals portrayed this as some kind of a wild idea of a few people. The fact is that there is no other public transport project in the country which has gone through such detailed consultation. Actually, the newspapers started criticizing the project as soon as the construction started, and the intensity of the criticism and the continuity of the criticism day in and day out in at least 3 major newspapers suggested that there was something more behind the criticism, and I think it's probably sponsored by people who had some vested interests in not taking off. However, it must be said to the credit of the government in Delhi that they persisted with it, had a large number of meetings on the design, including foreign experts, and the final designs and details were approved by the stakeholders and international consultants as it was going on.
तो इस बीआरटी के वजह से बसों का 40% ट्रैवल टाइम कम हुआ और उसके साथ ही इसी दौरान 7% बस यूजर्स भी बढ़े. तो ये बस लेन का फ़ायदा इमरजेंसी सर्विसेज भी उठा रहे थे, जैसे कि एम्बुलेंस, फायर ब्रिगेड, पुलिस. लेकिन 2012 में न्याय भूमि नामक एक एनजीओ ने एक पेटिशन फाइल करी, ये मांग करते हुए कि ये बस लेन को खोल दिया जाए सभी गाड़ियों के लिए.
It was amazing that for a project of 6 kilometers, which did not affect most people in Delhi, there was such a hue and cry if something had really ruined the city, and this carried on and on. But the government stuck with it, and even went through a court case in the High Court, and the High Court ruled that it was a worthwhile project, and there were things that could be improved, and said that it should continue. That was the ruling. But as soon as the government changed, the new government came in, and in a very, very, I would say, very populist mode, looking as if they're looking after people's interests. At the same time, they talked about people who are having problem on congestion on that road, that's the motorists. In a very populist fashion, they did something which no other government has ever done, which is publicly destroy public property. And they destroyed the public property of the BRT in Delhi, that's 6 kilometers. They actually took pride. The deputy chief minister came on television and started the digging himself. And so it is amazing that something like this can be done, and the government itself can destroy property over which crores had been spent. It's difficult to, in a very short explanation, say what are all the reasons, but I would say the reason it failed in Delhi was because some foreign NGOs did not like the fact that the Delhi BRT was specially designed for Delhi conditions, and they did not follow some of their ideas. It was very interesting that the Indian community did not give credit for special designs which were developed here, and listened to foreign experts which didn't follow international norms. Secondly, I think there was the reporting by the media, by uneducated editors and reporters who did not go into the background of details. And some reporters themselves have told me over that period that they tried to tell the editors what the truth was, but they weren't heard. And so when this populist government came in, without too much thinking, they had it destroyed. And I guess they could do it because it was only a 6 kilometer stretch. So it was a combination of the professionals not knowing enough on how these things work around the country, and very easy to criticize. It's like, joining up with a group which is bashing up someone's already on the ground. And instead of thinking how bus transport systems should be made more efficient, how it could be improved, it just got destroyed. There is no good scientific or logical reason why it should have been destroyed.
तो एक स्टडी के हिसाब से हर 1 लाख लोगों के लिए 50 बसें होनी चाहिए, और ये रेशियो सिर्फ बैंगलोर में ठीक है। लेकिन इसके बावजूद बैंगलोर के रास्तों पर प्राइवेट गाड़ियाँ बहुत है। लेकिन इसके पीछे एक कारण है, क्योंकि बैंगलोर में एक डेडिकेटेड बस लेन नहीं है।
This brings in a very important issue that no matter how efficient public transport is made, how the number of buses is increased, it will still not give you proper service if people continue to use their own vehicles. So in all cities where public transport is given priority, there is a deliberate effort to disincentivize use of personal vehicles. And how can it be done? There are different examples. In Singapore, you have to buy a permit before you can buy a car, and the cost of the permit is often more than the cost of the car. In London, they introduced in 2003 something called the congestion charge, which means any car entering central London, which is a crowded area, has to pay a fee before they are allowed to enter the central part. It was started in 2003, and the congestion charge was around £3. Today it's gone over £10. And the entire amount which is raised from congestion charging is put into public transport, because they want public transport to improve. In Bangalore, this hasn't happened, because Bangalore has continued building big roads, flyovers, which are all meant for personal vehicles.
और आज जब सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग इतना इम्पॉर्टेंट है, पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट और भी इम्पॉर्टेंट हो जाता है, क्योंकि पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट जितना सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग और कोई भी गाड़ी में नहीं मिलेगा। कार में सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग बिल्कुल नहीं मिलेगा अनलेस हम खुद का गाड़ी चलाते हैं। और आप ही इमेजिन करो कि अगर हमारे पूरे देश में सब लोग खुद का कार चलाने लग गए तो रास्तों का क्या होगा? सामनेट जैसे ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस काफ़ी समय से पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट के लिए अलग अलग तरीके से लड़ रहे हैं। अगर आप भी चाहते हैं कि हमारे देश की पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट इम्प्रूव करे तो इस पिटीशन को साइन करिए। हर 1 लाख लोगों के लिए 50 बसें। लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में दी गई है।